Dear participants of the conference, let me present you the topic we are going to discuss within today's presentation and today's conference section, right? So that is computational linguistics tools in mapping emotional dislocation of translated fiction. I am presenting today on behalf of Ivan Antonovich Bekhta and me, Nataliia Hrytsiv. Thus, to talk a little bit about the introductory notes, current study focuses on the interaction between human and computer in processing text or fiction. It is related to operations as applied to overall managing and creating parallel translation corpus in regard to English and Ukrainian languages. Corpus linguistics comprehensive tools are used both for processing parallel translation corpus data and for the afterwards analysis of the data obtained. Preliminary findings can be exemplary for better understanding of how corpora helps in the study of authors' individual style, dominance, and in what way it can stimulate more qualitative and faithful rendition in translation. The paper provokes a number of issues on how quantitative parameterization can be useful for translation studies analysis. Also, we elucidate the possibilities of natural language processing manipulation in regard with tagging, hence researching emotional dislocation as verbalized in fiction. If to talk about deepening the profession-oriented skills within the scope of translation, translator training and translation studies areas, the advantage of applied linguistics tools in generation of language corpora in electronic format is nowadays a must rather than a choice, especially when it comprises the sheer volume of fiction to be processed. It is a powerful and promising technology to objectively reconstruct arguments in order to amply exemplify its findings and formulate well-grounded hypotheses. Thus, what we do, we briefly discuss key characteristics of quantitative comparative analysis, how it can be used in the practice of translation, and what its preliminary advances are. As the object of this study is the parallel translation corpus of Donna Tartt's novel The Goldfinch and its Ukrainian variant done by Viktor Shuvko. The subject of the study is statistical featuring of emotional dislocation of the English novel The Goldfinch in parallel English-Ukrainian corpora and its correlation to translation studies analysis. To mention a number of prerequisites, recent decades have witnessed a shift towards an increasingly extensive use of computerized approaches in modern philological researches. For effective translation studies analysis, one can make use of corpora-oriented and descriptive approaches along with some statistical methods for probability measurement. In addition, one can make use of the undoubted advantages of digital markup in the source text and target text parallel. For effective translation studies analysis, one should also use pure philological translation studies approaches along with applicable statistical approaches for probability measurement. In addition, one can take support from the mathematical linguistics and computational linguistics tools to process the source language and the target language for better analysis. In other words, the approach to translation nowadays is two-sided or two-folded, right? So on the one hand, of course, the researcher, the translator himself or the reader decodes the message, right, interprets the message and analyzes it. But on the other hand, to have a certain objective grounds, right, to have certain validation, to have certain evaluation, one needs solid data. In our case, that is statistical data obtained by means of certain computational tools. When we talk about study reasoning, thus a case study of the novel The Goldfinch, written by the Pulitzer-winning novelist Donna Tartt, is chosen since it has never been researched in English-Ukrainian parallel from statistical perspective. In addition, the Goldfinch was awarded with Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction and was film adopted in 2019, which proves that is a novel, modern novel, right, which provokes a certain background for the modern reader, apart from being filmed, we still concentrate on the printed version of this novel. When we talk about the typology, thus we have chosen the annotated text. When text is split up to phrase level, we are talking about the bilingual corresponding text in English and Ukrainian. We are discussing literary corpus, that is a special variety of sample corpus, which may further be subdivided as based on type of text included in it. And we discuss parallel, that is text in English along with its Ukrainian translation. It needs to be mentioned that all the alignment and normalization was done for the sake of the original text to mirror the translation and vice versa. To discuss certain pre-computer procedures, right? Thus, first, text markup system was elaborated. So to mention here, first, that is the paragraph mark sentence tag, and then that is already our field of research. Thus, to tag certain aspects we're interested in, to tag emotional dislocation as verbalized in the text, we have chosen loss, addiction, anxiety, punishment, rambling, guilt, suicide, abandonment, disappointment, obsession, failure, which actually describe and depict the original to its full, right? So that is actually the subdivision within which all the emotional dislocation and alienation aspects of the main hero are enclosed and depicted. And then to have certain numbering, so we have Ada, right? And we have Ada, suppose number 1 verbalized in the text, then Ada number 2, and so on, right? So that would give us later in the text the full picture, the holistic picture of emotional dislocation within the original and then the translation. What we have obtained from the original fragment, that is actually this kind of markup, right? In here, we do see that is the beginning of the paragraph. Then we see Ada, disappointment as the subdivision of it. Then we have the sentence, then Ada, numbering, right? In square brackets, we have omitted a text only for the purpose of this presentation and this article. And then at the end, we have the enclosing remarks for the same disappointment Ada. The translated fragment looks exactly the same, right? Having the same numeration, the same subdivision, only having the Ukrainian correspondence. So the sample of the created corpus of source text with focus on Ada looks like this. Then we have the results. That is only the portion of the results, right? Screenshot for the presentation. Okay, so we might see that is loss, then disappointment, rambling, punishment, and so on and so forth, having the exact places, the exact sentences where they occur. Then we have the same in the Ukrainian text, right? So we have the same loss, disappointment, rambling, and we have the corresponding sentences of its occurrence. Then we come up with the result, right? So that is, we might compare the total word usage in the original text, Then we see it in the target text, right? Then we talk about the chosen adder subtext. Then we have adder verbalization. In here, we still subdivide implicit adder and explicit adder, right? Implicit meaning when that is hidden beneath the surface layer of the text, right? And we have explicit adder. That is when the receiver is sure and has no doubts that is this or that emotional dislocation, right? So that is when in the text we have I am sad. That is quite possible, right? Quite logical that is the explicit adder. Or suppose I feel the bitter loss of my near mother, right? So that is the explicit one. Then, in total, we have the enumeration of words in the original, right? A little bit lesser number is in the translated text, but not that much sufficient, right? When we talk about adder sample parallel translation corpus, that is of more interest to us, right? And it counts to 2,248 in the original source text, right? And actually that is 2,031 words in the translated text. When we talk about the explicit adder and its grammatical variants, it occurs 13 times in source text and 16 times in the target text. While when we talk about the implicit adder, we talk about 45 samples of its usage in the source text and 59 times in the target text, right? It might give us the hint that the translator was trying to compensate, right, some losses of the original as dispersed all over the text, right? Then we have the percentage rate of the subdivided adder, right? So the most frequent use that was about the abandonment, right? Then we talk about the addiction, anxiety, disappointment, failure, okay? Punishment occupies 15, right? And loss, the same, sums up to 15. Apart from numerous the word usage number, we also made use of Bekhta platform, right, and calculated the coefficiency, thus only to see the coincidences or common convergent and divergent features of the original and the translated text, right? Thus, in here, we talk about the coefficient of lexical diversity within the top subtext, within the chosen adder usage. So, in the original, that is 0.48, right, or 49, while in the original, that is in the translation, that is much higher, that is 0 and 67, which means that the translator made use of more synonyms, more synonymic diversity than the original author herself. When we talk about the coefficient of syntactic complexity, right, it almost coincides. When we talk about the coefficient of speech coherence, that is 170, almost 75 in the original, and that is 1.75 and 2.23 in the translator, right? It needs to be taken into account that that was not only the translator's choice, right? That was also the structure of the language, okay? That was also due to certain grammatical variations which are typical and allowed normatively in the Ukrainian language and are a little bit not that much, so to say, popular and developed within the English as the language on the grammatical level, right? And then we talk about the exclusivity index, which is almost the same, right? And concentration index, that is much higher in the source text. Thus, all in all, we have the findings on all the equivalents, right? So we may come up with the with certain comparison and certain conclusions, right? Which was obvious from the table depicted above. And then, having all of that done, we may shift to translation studies textual analysis, right? So to say the pure philological analysis as interrelated with, right, or maybe generated from the statistical parameterization done before. Thus, when we talk about other keywords of source text in the chosen subtext, prevailing nouns are mother, night, world, right? And when we talk about the verbs, that is wanted and woke. And when we talk about other keywords of target text in the chosen subtext, so we have the same nouns with prevailing mater, serce, oczy, nicz, and вночі as a variation, світ. And verbs, we have this wyuczy. What would this give to us? The point is that when we make use of philological methodology, so it will shift us to absolutely different dimension. Suppose why do we have in the Ukrainian translation serce as highlighted, right, as being dominant within this emotional dislocation, right? So what was standing below this choice of the translator? We cannot do it with the help of the computational linguistics tools. That would demand a bit different translation studies approach and philological approach to give the definition to the strategy of the translator and to trace his choice on the contextual level, right? So we will need to take all of the examples with this usage of serce lexeme and then give the definition to reasoning behind this choice. And despite the small number illustrated, this few samples shows that natural language processing tools are profound resources for translation studies analysis, along with linguistics-oriented approaches. They are useful at different stages of translation process. In here, we talk about the pre-translation source text analysis, original author statistical profiling, defining the author's idiostyle via linguometry and keyword generators, key lexical and stylistic features, digital markup, along with translators' expertise and experience, will undoubtedly navigate the professional translator and add up to the successful translation. Then we talk about translation process. In here, natural language processing tools can help to identify dynamic and stable elements in a text, decide on strategies such as explicitation or compensation. What is more important to be able to balance them? It makes lexical choice easier for the translator. Mismatches would become a conscious translator's decision rather than mistake or negligence. And we may also discuss post-translation. From the viewpoint of translation assessment and critical evaluation, natural language processing tools as well as parallel translation corpus help to detect the holistic picture, to trace objective and subjective shifts of cohesion and coherence in the target text. More emphasis might be placed on transitivity, structure, and ideational function of the text. As it becomes obvious, the intention is at its initial stage, but we still hold the ambition that eventually the so-called statistical translation studies, right, within parallel translation corpus as related to fiction analysis, right, to literary writing analysis, would give impetus to serious theoretical research and would eventually result in applicable merits in this sphere. To shift to the conclusions, it has been proven that quantitative indicators are able to determine the main vectors of the analysis of other dominants and their correspondences in translation, and this fact gives grounds to talk about the quantitative equilibrium with minor fluctuation of corresponding units. The analysis was carried out on the material of a digital marked up corpus of text from the point of view of computational and corpus linguistics. The use was made of qualitative analysis, dominant in current linguistic studies. This allowed us to draw a holistic statistic profile of the author and the translator. The obtained results help to trace the discrepancies of parallel profiling, some of the unavoidable due to difference in pair language systems, and avoidable translators' choices. The perspective is recognized if proceeding with the comparison of multiple translation reproductions of the same source text writing, we will come up with a more profound data. However, it will take some time since we so far have only one published translation in Ukrainian. Another possibility is to have this comparison done within the versatile languages, meaning to take German translation into account, to take French translation into account, and so on. Thank you so much for your attention. We do hope you have some questions or maybe some discussion to follow up.